Well, welcome to another installment of the Medical Valuation Lab's Dockside Chats. I'm your host for this month, Steve Parenti, joined here with Tom Gunderson. I thought for once we really should just, we don't know how much longer the weather's going to hold out here when we have to go to fireside chat, though we have enough smoke in the air. So I thought it'd be good just to try one really by the dock, and hopefully it doesn't get people seasick as it goes. It's working on me. But today, we're honored to have two alumni from the Carlson School and Val Lab, alum in many ways in terms of primordial versions of the Val Lab, actually with some of the work Adrine's done with some of the field trips from before. And I just wanted to give the public service announcement here. So those who don't know me, I'm Steve Parenti, from the Associate Dean of the Carl Wilson Global Institute and a professor of finance, specializing in health economics. And we're doing this in part to popularize what the Val Lab's done and all of its impact, but we also have this great new program that we're starting our first inaugural class this Friday as the orientation period for our Global Medical Industry MBA, which is designed for folks overseas, including our friends in North America and South America. So we're very excited about that starting, but we're going to be looking for new either corporate or other students, as you know. So if anyone interested that wants to take the Millie Valuation Lab Magic broader, this is the place to go. So with that promotional announcement out of the way, just some ground rules. The way we work this is that for the first half hour or so, it's on the record. We are recording. We're going to then go off the record and stop recording on Zoom. What is recorded will then be put up on a link afterwards to catch what's there. Obviously, everybody behave themselves. We don't want to, get censored on Zoom or something else like that in the future. But just to start off with, basically, we're excited to see that we got probably our biggest at least draw in terms of sign up on this. Maybe I think it's actually just you folks, just Tom and Adrine to do this. I don't think it was the title, but we tried to sensationalize the title by going West Coast and say basically what would Elon or Jeff do if they were healthcare czars? And so first of all, I want to explain the context of that in a second, but I just want, if you wouldn't mind, Adrine, just to introduce yourself and then turn over to Tom, and then we'll get in there from there. You're on, Adrine.
Hi, I'm Adrine Keung. I am a Carlson part-time MBA alum, graduated in 2011, and have been with Millie since I was a student through graduation, was a fellow for a year, and stayed on as an alumni affiliate. Currently, I'm the executive director of our research collaborations at Trio US, which is a small company with its parent company actually in Canada and Paris with Trio Global. We focus mostly in oncology, especially in early phase therapeutics. So helping find early drug trials into human trials and moving it into the next expansion phase, handing it off to probably a larger contract research organization. But a lot of what we do is helping with the preclinicals and then moving it directly into humans.
Thank you. And Thomas.
Yes, thank you. My name is Thomas Cloyd, and I am a Minnesota native, born and raised in Edina. Don't hold it against me. I worked in EHRs for a while, and I also am a proud alum of the Carlson School of Management. I attended the full-time program and graduated in 2018 and did the Val Lab and loved it. Was also a Millie Fellow, loved it. Was able to intern at Medtronic, was super cool. But then after graduation, I moved out to California, where I now live in Oakland, and work for a little company called Kaiser Permanente. Started in the corporate strategy team, working on our strategic plan and kind of overall enterprise initiatives. Though recently, about 5 months ago, I moved to our Northern California region into our quality department, where I help implement new clinical technologies, which is pretty cool too. I also sit on a few steering committees, the Val Lab, as Steve has drummed up our excitement about, and then a healthcare startup incubator based out here. And then I've been able to advise a couple other startups in true Bay Area fashion, which has been really cool to see. So hopefully I can talk more about that, but happy to be here and looking forward to it.
That's awesome. And thank you both for joining in. So let me I guess sort of the premise of why the sort of the Jeff Bezos versus Elon Musk way of thinking. So and maybe, you know, on one hand, they've both gone to, well, I guess Jeff has gone to orbit, true orbit, you know, though, you know, Richard Branson, according to NASA, has gone to orbit. And so Elon, his car has gone to orbit and beyond, but he has not done it yet. But where I think it's sort of interesting is that if you look at how they've approached their management styles, and you track Jeff Bezos from Amazon in the early days, even really prior to the dot-com really boom in the late 90s, you know, it seems as though everything that he has done with that firm is just sort of built very organically and fit to purpose. Or it's like, first, we're just going to be an online marketplace. We're competing with other online marketplaces. And lo and behold, we need a way to pay systems. We need servers to sort of take a look at inventory control. We need to think about our analytics. We need to think about going in terms of shipping. We need to buy planes. And so, you know, he didn't start out in 1996 going, you know, I'm going to have the biggest fleet of like 777s and 767s. I mean, that kind of went, you know, later as things went on. Whereas you look at, you know, Elon Musk, and he's been in a lot of different things. But if we just take, for example, shall we say his most explosive innovation in terms of the notion of going to Mars, or just the whole space program with SpaceX. And for those of you who haven't read the story, it's common folklore in business. You know, the thought is like he wanted to get some satellites launched, and then kind of reached out to some Russian folks to say, like, how much could this cost? He thought their costs were too high and he could do it better. And then, you know, they laughed at him. And then he's like, well, I'm going to just try to do it better with some PayPal money and other things to see what I can do. And lo and behold, SpaceX basically is just dazzling the world, having, you know, rockets land on precision or coming in 3 combinations and getting NASA contracts. But along the way, for those who didn't track it, there were a lot of rockets that exploded. And for those of you, I've become an avid devotee of watching the Starship innovation, the thing that'll take us to Mars. And it's like, oh my God, it's actually going to land. And no, it just blew up. And then the second one just blew up. And then it almost was there, it landed, then it blew up. So it's an interesting way to innovate, as opposed to some, you know, very careful, planful things that Jeff Bezos do versus explosive innovation. And so my question out to Adrine and Thomas is like, so if we think about California entrepreneurship, and both of you have been engaged in that to a certain extent, you could say this is a style of it, or I should say not California, just West Coast entrepreneurship. But how, when you think about healthcare, which of these two models, if any, applies? And we did a pre-meeting call, and I'll reiterate what I said before. There are no wrong answers. This is just a spitballing session on what we think kind of works and doesn't work in healthcare. So we'll go to Thomas and then Adrine for thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess first, I also want to say I'm speaking on behalf of Thomas Cloyd only here, not on any of the organizations I work for. Not that I think I'll say anything too controversial, but yeah, so I think this is a great question. And, you know, Elon, explosive, go in quick, fast, fail fast, learn, and be successful. You need disruptive auto, which is a huge legacy industry, and then the same with space. But as we know with healthcare, it's unique, or we say it's unique with regulation, all the players, lives are at stake, all of that. Can you be that explosive? And I actually think the news today, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Tesla is now under investigation by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration or organization for their autopilot crashes. And I think that's kind of a sign of maybe that Elon's approach doesn't work as well in healthcare, because when people's lives are at stake, you can't just go and mess around. Like with his autonomous rockets, you know, it's still a loss, but there's a lot of money going away. So my instinct is that healthcare is so complex, and you add in the regulation, that you almost need a more Bezos approach, which is kind of what they're doing with moving into pharmacy and wearables and smart home devices. That is a more practical way to go, but I don't know if it's best, because it's not going to change things up maybe as quickly as people want. But I was thinking about this today, it's like, you know, what he did was literally rocket science, but is healthcare more complex than rocket science? Maybe because there's more players involved, and it's kind of, you know, humanity versus physics. But yeah, I think I'm disappointed to say, but I think the more organic growth of an Amazon and Bezos seems like it could be more successful because there's so much risk from so many different parties doing the kind of Elon way, but I could be convinced otherwise, I think, too.
So Adrine, what are your thoughts?
So I coming from an approach where most of my career I was with academic health centers, and recently switched into a very different side of the industry, but have mostly been working with pharma companies and kind of the biotech firms in different capacities. And I think there's more Elon Musk type approaches that we'll be seeing, especially in this field, only because I think outside of like healthcare, the payers, and outside of that type of industry, there's a lot of aspects about health and the medical field that has become far more approachable and accessible to anyone who doesn't actually have a medical background. So, I look at curative, which was a big thing here in LA for a while, with the COVID pandemic, a small startup that was led by a 26-year-old without any training in this field, looking to see what they could do with septic shock, decided, well, what if we just did an oral test for COVID, right? And then there was the FDA warning that came up that perhaps what we just had about 200 million people test with is probably not as accurate. But he was lucky enough to secure a contract with Dodger Stadium where most of the testing was happening. So I know that some of the story that I've heard, and I don't know the folks over there very well, but it was more that they secured the contract and started testing things kind of on the go and figuring things out and becoming more sophisticated that way. So, I think there is some validity to that Elon Musk approach in that there are people that are outside of this kind of world of healthcare coming in with innovative ideas, wanting to try and do kind of what's been done with other industries in healthcare. But to your point, Thomas, I think because of the nature of the industry with human lives at stake, and accuracy and quality and safety being a big concern, it is a regulated industry. That it's probably not as easy to do the let's just launch, blow up, and see what we learn from approach. So I think you're right in that it's probably more the Bezos approach for most of the larger corporations, but I do see a lot of innovation happening in small realms that are more like the Elon Musk approach.
So let's pick at this a little bit, because if nothing else, we kind of talk about the medical industry, like broadly defined, as like everything. It's like $6 trillion. So let's pick inside each of the spaces, because to your point, Thomas, and Adrine too, like, some parts of it are life and death and some parts of it are not. It's like, I mean, I remember when I worked at an insurance company before I was an academic, there wasn't much in the insurance company that was life and death other than like some stuff in the cafeteria that could go sideways, right? So, but at least you figure that was regulated by OSHA somehow. But I guess that, so can you think of like whether it's maybe medical devices or pharma or even health IT, the areas that are, there? Because, and the reason why I bring this up is like, if you think about I'm sure, Thomas, you remember this from Medtronic, you've heard the story, and Adrine, you've heard it too, like the classic, Medtronic origin story of like essentially, surgeon in the University of Minnesota working with Earl Bakken as a technician, not a multi-billionaire yet, just like, let's take this thing from the dog and put it in the baby and put it in the child, and we'll see what happens. And it was, truly cowboy surgery. Arguably, that was more Musk-like than, and the intriguing, and the reason I bring it up is, what intrigues me is that, physicians still as a class get to do things off-label. I mean, granted, they face malpractice if there's an established practice that says, there's no way you can do anything. But I mean, most surgery in itself, when it's really crucial, is like heroic acts, right? There generally is not a way quite to do every surgery totally automated. So I'll turn to Adrine first and then to Thomas. Just thoughts on drilling in. And granted, everybody should know, like, if you do this again with me or Tom Gunderson, some of these things are scripted, some of them are not. So anyway, go ahead. And there's no wrong answer. So.
So I guess your question is more when you drill into some of these areas, are there kind of more cavalier approaches that can be done?
Yeah,
Is that
or Musk or Bezos like stuff. Like, I mean, I guess I'm drilling. Are there sub segments? I think you touched on it that are like, these could definitely hit the Musk paradigm. They're designed to be disruptive. There won't be much debris. What might be those spaces? And then because California has a lot of entrepreneurship too, because remember or the West Coast, I should say.
yeah.
So feel free to connect the dots there too.
Sure. I mean, everyone here has allergic reactions, at least in Southern California. I'm in LA right now, but when people refer to kind of the Southern California region as Silicon Beach, there's a lot of Silicon Valley like activities. A lot of Silicon Valley corporations actually moved a lot of their kind of R&D and smaller offices down here too. But Culver City, kind of where a lot of the pharma companies I'm working with are establishing their offices. They're trying to turn that into kind of biotech alley and really establish an identity. I think in that sense, it's still very much a Bezos approach, no matter what they call innovation. If you talk to someone from Google and say, this is innovative, they'll say, that's not innovations. That's just using the same formula. You're just going into a different product line or a different approach to it, right? But then I look at with all the work that's happening with AI and trying to find ways to utilize that type of platform in areas that previously weren't very tech dependent. And I think there's a great opportunity for a Musk-like approach. I have friends who are part of the Forward Clinic group, which they're not reinventing the wheel with the way that they're still using the same physicians, the same type of model for billing and whatnot. The big difference is how the clinic experience works and how accessible the clinic is. And, they turned it into like a fitness club, but for health. So you have a membership card, you go in, you get your weight check, you get your blood pressure check. So it's really more focused on kind of the quick urgent care needs that are more like cold sinus type of things versus more preventative. It's not for the chronic diseases. It's definitely not going to be a place where they're going to diagnose anything more serious, but in a way that was disruptive in the way that they kind of set up to make the feel of it something that's unique. Everyone gets an Apple Watch, everyone gets a gold card to say you're part of a country club type activity. So in some ways that's disruptive, and all those guys, none of them have a healthcare background. Most were from Google and Uber. So I think there's definitely pockets where innovation can happen in the Musk way, but for the most part, if I look at our pharma companies that we work with, there's only so much we can really do in a Musk type approach because of the dangers involved and the risks involved with using actual patients and looking for therapy, and of course, do no harm. Risk benefit has to weigh out according to our regulations and for ethic reasons, right? So there's definitely limitations to how much of that you can really do, at least in the field I'm in. But that's not to say that it's not doable in, like I said, in small aspects, especially if it's more technology based or decision analytics is a big thing. Predictive analytics is still something that's becoming more and more of a tool here in our field, which other fields have been using it, but in biotech at least, it's not something we've really learned how to harness and really make use of. But I do think there's opportunities there.
Great. Thomas, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Adrine, I totally agree. First out of the Forward, I'm always interested in their first commercials I saw here. I was like, ooh, that's fancy. I got to see what that's all about. So yeah, I totally agree. There's pockets where disruptive, fail fast innovation works. I mean, look at the COVID vaccine. That clearly was way faster than anyone ever could imagine with something where lives are at stake. So that just goes to show that if there's, social political will, you can do anything. And so maybe that bleeds through into other areas now, because maybe that's kind of opened the door towards not just being disruptive in business models or, safe technology, but challenging things. So that's one thing that comes to mind. But another thing too is that there is space for Musk-like disruption, especially with technology. But to me, the talk is always about how can we change all of healthcare holistically? And I think, as we kind of just said, that you can't really do that with a Muskian approach. It needs to be this more organic growth. And I think with data too, that's a big thing I always think about, that we all know that the strength of data, especially in healthcare, is how broad and deep we can get it, because then you can be more, have stronger predictions and understanding. But to integrate all of that data requires like this entire holistic system to be communicating, from wearable consumer devices to claims to clinical data. And to get that together, can you be like crazy Elon Musk disruptive and maybe come up with a new business that somehow creates an incentive where everybody wants to be together? To me, that seems hard, because it goes back to what I first said, that you're kind of now dealing with humans and different parties, and that's super difficult. So yeah, I think there's space to do it, especially in specific technology. But for this whole holistic piece of tying everything together, which I think we need to really, you know, bring down costs and actually make the change that I think a lot of people want to see, you can't, well, maybe you can, but I think it might be more difficult to be a fail fast approach for that big holistic system, which I think is kind of like what we're already saying.
Yeah. So we're gonna take a different tack on this. So in parts of sort of an alumni engagement tour. So I'll throw the question out to you, Thomas, first. Like, can you name like one thing or one or more from the Val Lab that you have taken from, now that your years out, that really has been helpful for you? And same for Adrine when in turn.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I literally used a deck from the Val Lab like 5 months ago at a hackathon that I was an advisor for. There was a group of people like, how do we look at a go-to-market strategy and what things do we need to consider? And I was like, I think I have a slide that lays out the 6 steps we need to do from class. So I used it and it was helpful, and they're actually moving forward with some stuff. So that understanding of the pathway, and then obviously getting to know it from going through the steps with you know, a client or a potential customer, is incredibly helpful, because you get at least an idea of what needs to happen. Of course, you're not going to be an expert in patents or anything like that, but you can get, you know, you can get dangerous with it. And I think knowing what that pathway is and being able to speak to points of it intelligently is incredibly useful. And so, and yeah, and I mean, I've used it a few times, and straight up, well, I don't know if I think I kept the logo there. So I think credit was served where it was due. So but yeah, I think that whole perspective on the pathway is super helpful.
Just sprinkle some maroon and golden background. You're fine.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Goldie's in there somewhere.
There you go. Adrine, how about you?
I echoed the same takeaways Thomas had. I haven't had the chance to really apply a lot of what we learned in directly, in the sense that I haven't been part of evaluation. My roles haven't been in that sense with like technology or a new device or anything in that sense. But a lot of the approach that the lab taught me was very valuable as I was going into my area of the healthcare and focus mostly in oncology. It was very helpful as I was working with some of the startup companies, and you know, cellular therapy was a big thing at the time that I was getting out of the MBA program, and you know, seeing that evolve and mature to the state that it's in right now has been really exciting. But you know, it was helpful to be able to be in a room with not just the scientists and the medical professionals, but also with the business folks, and be able to help translate what on earth this really means, and why we have an interest in pursuing something that seemed at the time very cavalier to the folks in at the health centers. So I gained a lot from just having an understanding of what's all involved in assessing whether there's something viable from that respect.
So we are almost drawing up on our, when we are going off the record, but one observation I want to make is, and as I was thinking about both you talk about what you gave from the lab, I mean, we are almost to the day, to the 13th anniversary of the valuation lab, when Mike Finch and I assembled, and Randy Nelson, they assembled a coalition of the willing to kind of make this thing happen. And one of my favorite memories of it was that we had the dean at the time, Allison Davis Blake, and Associate Dean Teresa here, now our current dean, kind of watching these experiences. But I remember Allison and I had this sort of conversation beforehand saying, there's no way MBAs can get a generalist, you know, they're generalists. They can't get specific to healthcare to actually do these valuations. And then she watched them do it. And so to a certain extent, for lack of a better term, it was Muskian. You know, what it kind of said was like, if there's a template, which was, I think, the one secret sauce of the whole thing, say like, we're not going to boil the ocean, but we know we got 8 or 9 things we have to cover. And if we just take our time and go through and reach out to experts and, you know, at the same time, be respectful of what the experts have to say, but know that they're not the expert for all of the 9 segments, and work in a team, it can really get something good. So I think that might have been the big takeaway. So in closing, this is a rapid round. So can either, we'll go first with you, Adrine. Like, what's a favorite memory of either Carlson or the lab, or any of the stuff associated with Millie? And, you know, just watch your language as you do it. That's all I'm
asking. Thanks for that precaution. I'll save the more candid talk for the off the record portion.
Yeah.
But for me, the relationships that I created in the lab has been a huge part of what's really helped shape my career after the MBA program. I remember being in one of the courses, and you know, we would talk about how you can come out untouched from the MBA program. It's not like an MD or a Juris Doctorate program in any other area where you get a license or have, you know, have something to be able to get into a particular role or career. The MBA really, you can come out completely untouched and nothing can change about your life despite having gone through the program, depending on what you make of it. But for me, the valuation lab was kind of the gateway into other Millie courses. And really what I gained was this community. You know, I see a lot of familiar names in this room. There's a lot of folks that I'm still in touch with who have gone on to do remarkable things. And what I appreciate about this community is it's not just about your success, but you get excited about the successes your colleagues and former alumni and others in the Millie program are doing, because you know that, you know, eventually that comes back to this community and you feel part of a lot of the great things that they're doing. So, you know, I had two career changes from the people that I met through Millie. Had a great opportunity to work with Steve directly at one point too. I'm sure he wants to block it out of his memory, but I enjoyed it.
It's good. It was all good. It was all
good. And with the Millie fellowship that was a result of the valuation lab, it was really interesting to be able to do case studies on the medtech failures and learn just a tremendous amount about what's involved and really the landscape in the Twin Cities in particular with what was happening in the medtech industry. So to me, it was an eye-opening experience, lifelong friends, lifelong colleagues, and just something that I can't put a price around.
Well, thank you. I feel the same. Thomas, how about yourself?
Totally agree. Community, I think, is really, education was great, yes, but I think the community, and so specific memory is 2 years ago, 2019, the Val Lab came out to Bay Area for the Palo Alto trip, and we had them visit a Kaiser facility. But that night, there was a gathering at a restaurant in San Francisco, and it was with a whole cohort of students I hadn't met, but all of them just brilliant, super interesting, doing cool stuff. And we were all able to exchange really valuable tips and stories and information on where people work. Because obviously everyone, even in the Millie program or in the valuation lab, is at different stages in their career and lives. And so it's just that connection that then brings so many different people that it's exciting. But the passion is there obviously for trying to improve healthcare and, you know, people's lives. So yeah, the community is amazing, and the opportunities to engage with them is growing, which is good.
Awesome. Well, it's been a delight working with all of you and the whole community. And I know that I think that everybody engaged feels the same. I'm going to close one thought, then we'll go off the record. I've been thinking about this notion. I think I shared with a few folks too, that like in the end, is Musk really more like Bezos than Bezos? And so the reason why I say that, if you think about it, like everything that Jeff has done is like very planful, very deliberate, there we're going. But the extent that Musk is like thinking like, we need to worry about an extinction level event. So what are all the things that we need to line up? Well, I need money, PayPal. I need to have really cool battery technology, and I need to find financiers that will buy into that, Tesla. I need to basically be able to like drill stuff in Mars so that I can make like the original Total Recall movie work with trains underground, given that there's no oxygen. Boring company. And I got to get there. SpaceX. And I need to have communications back and forth. Starlink. I mean, maybe, you know, I mean, maybe it's, you know, maybe it could be that they're really kindred spirits deep down. They're really like Spielberg and Lucas, you know, sharing thoughts on Raiders of the Lost Ark on the beach and really can get along fine. This sounds more like an off the record conversation. So with that note, I'd like to thank you both for just an incredible conversation, and we'll be back again next month. Our plan is to actually have more of a broader alumni conversation with both Tom and I in September. So stay tuned for that time. But otherwise, I think, Jessica, we're ready to go off the record. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.